I'm 18 years old. I'm not sure who I am anymore. For as long as I can remember, I've been carrying the weight of a family that didn't care for me. A family where love wasn't something that was given easily, and where the silence between us felt louder than any words ever could. I used to dream of having a family that actually cared, one where I felt seen and valued. But I was wrong. What I didn't know was that my life, everything I thought I knew about family, was about to shatter in a way I never saw coming. My name is Alina, and this is the story of how my own parents left me behind. Abandoned. Alone. In a place where I knew no one and had nothing to my name. Growing up wasn't easy. My father, Albert, was strict and demanding. He never seemed to care if I was happy or if I had dreams of my own. My mother, Stella, was always there physically, but emotionally, she might as well have been a million miles away. She was too wrapped up in her own fears and insecurities to see what was happening to me. No matter what I did, it was never enough. I was always just a shadow, trying to make myself seen, trying to make them proud. I was stuck in a small town, working at a local diner, hoping for something bigger, something more. College wasn't an option. Not because I didn't want it, but because I had a father who said it was a waste of money and a mother who never stood up to him. So I stayed. I worked. I lived in the shadow of their expectations with the constant ache of being invisible. But there was always this feeling, this nagging thought that something bigger was out there. That maybe, just maybe, there was a different life for me somewhere, waiting to be lived. But I had no idea what would happen next. Something that would change everything. It started out like any other family trip. It was supposed to be a Jacob bonding experience. A family road trip to my uncle's wedding in a town I didn't even know, hundreds of miles away. A simple drive to celebrate family, right? Just a few days to escape the monotony of life and pretend that we were the happy family we were supposed to be. 3 days into the trip, we were in the middle of nowhere. Just miles and miles of empty roads, fields stretching for miles, and the occasional truck rumbling by. I didn't even think to question why we were in such a remote place. I was just glad to get out of the house. It had been the same routine for years, me, trying to stay out of Albert's way, while Stella said nothing, just watching her life pass by. But what happened next? I never saw it coming. We stopped at some lonely rest area in the middle of nowhere, Colorado. My father and I had been silent for most of the trip. Jacob, my older brother, had been making jokes at my expense, as usual. There were no real conversations, just a dull atmosphere of resentment that hung over the car like a thick fog. I decided I needed a break. I stepped out of the car, stretched my legs, and went to the bathroom. No big deal. It wasn't like I had anything better to do. When I came out, I felt the heat of the sun on my face, but something was wrong. I didn't hear the hum of the engine. No one was standing by the car. The Suburban was gone. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty parking space, thinking it was some stupid joke. They had to be around here somewhere, right? I checked the rest area, looking for them. Nothing. Not a single trace of my family. I thought maybe I had missed them. Maybe they'd gone to get something from the vending machine. But after a few minutes of searching, I realized I was completely alone. The first few minutes felt like hours. My heart pounded in my chest. I kept telling myself they were just playing around. They'd come back. I sat on the curb, waiting, hoping. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, I started to feel something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't a joke. They weren't coming back. And I was stranded here in the middle of nowhere with nothing. I had no phone, No wallet. No money. I didn't even have the sense to bring my ID with me. I was a stranger in a place I didn't know, with no way to contact anyone. And then, that feeling of betrayal hit me like a wave. How could they? How could they leave me behind like this? Like I was nothing? I waited another hour, telling myself that they would come back. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't just a prank. This was real. They had left me here to fend for myself. They had abandoned me, just like they had abandoned me all my life. Jacob, one moment, I was laughing with them. The next, I was alone in the middle of nowhere, watching the car drive off into the distance. I stood in the middle of that rest stop, watching my family drive off, feeling my world come crashing down. I had no phone, no wallet, no way of contacting anyone, just the clothes on my back and the overwhelming emptiness of being completely alone. As the minutes turned into hours, I knew I couldn't just sit here and wait for something that wasn't coming. I had to survive. There was no other option. The reality hit me hard. I was stuck in a place I didn't know, with no resources and no idea what to do next. I looked around at the small, quiet rest area. There was a run-down bathroom, some vending machines, and a few scattered cars. But none of them were familiar, none of them offered any comfort. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, and my family wasn't coming back for me. I thought maybe I could just walk into town and find help, but the nearest town was miles away. I didn't even know how to get there, or if anyone would even be willing to help. With nothing left but my desperation, I approached a few people who passed through the rest area, hoping for a glimmer of kindness. But each interaction only reminded me of how alone I truly was. I finally found a woman in her car, an older woman, who I asked if I could borrow her phone. I had no choice but to reach out to someone. I called a shelter in town, hoping for a place to stay, knowing no one in my family was coming to help me. No one cared enough to come back. With no choice left, I took a deep breath and followed the woman's hesitant offer to drive me to the shelter in the nearest town, about 40 miles away. As we drove, my mind raced. I kept replaying what had happened at the rest stop. How could they do this to me? They were supposed to be my family. They were supposed to be the ones I could rely on, and yet, here I was, left behind, abandoned without even a second thought. The car ride felt endless. I stared out the window, feeling the weight of everything. The realization was setting in. I didn't belong with them anymore. They had shown me, in the most painful way, that I wasn't worth anything. That my survival was something they didn't care about. I was just disposable. I arrived at the shelter, exhausted and unsure. The man behind the desk, Dave, looked at me with a mix of sympathy and caution as I explained my situation. He told me I could stay for the night, but that I needed to figure things out quickly. I had nothing. No money, no ID, no connections. All I had were the few belongings I had packed for the trip, and now they felt useless. The cold reality settled in as I lay on the small cot in the shelter that night. How could my parents, the people who brought me into this world, leave me like this? I replayed their words in my head, those moments when they made me feel like I was nothing. How many times had my father told me I was worthless, incapable of doing anything right? How many times had my mother, with her distant silence, let it happen? I couldn't believe it. They were my family, and yet they left me, like I was disposable. I wasn't sure how to feel anymore, anger, sadness, or disbelief. The weight of the betrayal hung over me like a cloud. I thought they loved me, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had always been invisible to them. But even with all the hurt, something inside me began to shift. The moment I realized they weren't coming back, something clicked. I couldn't stay here forever, wallowing in self-pity. I had to survive. I had to move forward, even if it meant doing it alone. The next morning, I got to work. I called around to see if anyone in town needed help. It didn't matter what kind of work it was. I needed something, anything, to get by. And that's when I found a diner called Sonny's. I walked in and asked the owner, an older woman named Geraldine, if she needed help. I told her my story, about being stranded, about not having money or a place to stay. She looked me over, as if sizing me up, and then said, "Jacob dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." I didn't hesitate. I agreed right away. It wasn't much, just washing dishes for a few hours a day, but it was a start, a small glimmer of hope in the darkness. I worked for a week at Sonny's. I slept at the shelter, wore donated clothes, and began to build a life from scratch. I started to see the first signs of control slipping back into my hands. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first time I got paid, I used the money to get a burner phone. I set up an email account and began researching ways to get a new ID. I wasn't sure how long I'd be in this small town, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay stuck in a shelter forever. I wasn't going to let my family's cruelty be the end of me. Jacob, I called a shelter in town. No one from my family was coming, but that didn't matter. I had to take control of my own life now. I started to feel the strength growing in me, even as I faced the harshest realities. I may have been abandoned, but that didn't mean I had to give up. I could fight. I would fight. It was a few days after I'd started working at Sonny's that I got the call. I was scrubbing dishes, my hands deep in soap and water, when the phone rang. At first, I hesitated to answer, but then I saw the unknown number flash on the screen. I didn't recognize the area code, but something in my gut told me it was them. It had to be. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of dread and hope building up in my chest. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and answered the phone. It was my mother's voice on the other end, shaking and strained with emotion. "Jacob, Alina? Where are you? We've been looking everywhere. We're so worried about you." The words felt hollow. They didn't sound like the mother I remembered. She wasn't desperate for my well-being, not really. She wasn't asking if I was okay or if I needed help. No, this was something else. This was guilt. Guilt from the parents who had left me stranded, who had made me feel like I was nothing. "Jacob, I'm fine," I said, my voice steady, though my emotions were anything but. "Jacob, what do you want?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, the awkward silence stretching between us like a chasm that had always been there, unspoken. And then, finally, she said it. "Jacob, we've been looking for you. We've tried everything. We need you to come back. We need to talk. Please, Alina." The words echoed in my head, bouncing around in the emptiness. They needed me? My heart clenched as the truth slowly settled in. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about them missing me or wanting me back in their lives. This was about them needing something from me. Something I could give them. Money, perhaps. I didn't know exactly what, but I felt it in my bones. They wanted to use me again. They had abandoned me with no plan, no phone call, nothing. And now, after all this time, they were coming back because they had no other choice. They had nothing left. But this wasn't the first time they'd needed me. It wasn't the first time I had been nothing more than a tool for them. In that moment, everything clicked. The betrayal, the years of being overlooked, of being treated like I didn't matter. It all made sense. My family didn't care about me. They didn't care about my life, my dreams, my well-being. They cared about what I could do for them. They had always cared about what I could give them. I realized then that I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't a person they loved. I was just a tool they thought they could manipulate. Something they could use when they were desperate. Something they thought would bend to their will whenever they needed it. I had been nothing more than an afterthought to them. When they drove off that day, they didn't leave me behind because they were mad or because they thought I could learn something from the experience. No, they left me because, in their eyes, I wasn't important enough to stay. I wasn't a part of their world anymore. I was a burden they didn't want to carry. And when the roles reversed, when they had nothing left, they came looking for me, hoping I would save them, just like I had always been expected to. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The anger, the hurt, it all became secondary. What mattered now was that I finally understood. I wasn't worth more to them than a dollar sign. And for the first time, I realized something important. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval or their validation. I didn't need them at all. Jacob, I realized they weren't looking for me because they missed me. They needed money. I was just a tool they thought they could manipulate. In that moment of clarity, I knew what I had to do. I had already built something for myself. I had already learned that the only thing that mattered was what I could build with my own hands, what I could create on my own. My family wasn't my future anymore. I was. I didn't need to answer their calls. I didn't need to go back and relive that toxic past. I had already moved on, and it was time to let go completely. I didn't know what to expect when I woke up the next morning. I wasn't sure if I was still in the shelter or if my life had truly started over. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to be the same person anymore. I had to figure out how to survive, how to move on from the family that left me in the dust. I spent the next few days at the shelter, my mind whirling with what had happened. But the shelter wasn't home, and I couldn't stay there forever. I needed to do something. Anything. I couldn't let myself sink into the darkness again. So, I got to work. I scoured the town for any job, any chance to start over. The people in the shelter were kind, but their sympathy wasn't what I needed. I needed a way out. That's when I found it. A small diner called Sonny's, tucked away on a corner of the main street. I walked in, not expecting much, just hoping for some kind of opportunity. The owner, an older woman named Geraldine, looked me over as I explained my situation. Jacob, dishwasher, quit yesterday. You work, you earn, but you mess up, and you're out. Start now. I didn't hesitate. I had nothing to lose, and I needed to take control. Washing dishes didn't matter to me. It was work. It was something. It was a lifeline. The first week at Sonny's was grueling. The hours were long, and my hands were raw from the dishwater, but something shifted in me. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to be someone I wasn't just to be loved. Every plate I scrubbed, every shift I worked, I was proving something to myself, not to them. As the days passed, I started to trust myself. I didn't need them. I didn't need my family's approval or their constant barbs to validate who I was. I had always been so desperate to make them proud, to be the daughter they could boast about, to be the one who would Jacob fix everything. But now I understood that the only person I needed to make proud was me. Jacob, I didn't need them. I had to stop trying to make them proud. The real Alberty was realizing that I could stand on my own. It was empowering, this realization. I had been walking through life with my head down, always trying to prove my worth. But now I stood tall. I wasn't bound by their expectations anymore. I wasn't defined by their rejection. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I'd stare up at the ceiling of the tiny room I was renting, and the weight of everything would come crashing down on me. The family I had loved, the family that had torn me apart, was still out there. And some nights, I wondered if I was fooling myself into thinking I was better off without them. But each day, I grew stronger. The pain of what they had done to me began to fade, and I realized something. They didn't get to control my story anymore. They didn't get to define who I was. I did. I was no longer the girl left behind in the middle of nowhere. I was Alina, a woman building her life, piece by piece on her own terms. Jacob, there were nights I cried, but each day I woke up stronger. No one was going to hurt me anymore. I worked at Sunny's for a few months. I learned more than just the basics of running a diner. I learned about resilience. I learned about being kind to myself, about not letting the scars of my past dictate my future. With every shift, I was building something, my independence, my strength, and a future where I wasn't just surviving, but thriving. One day, as I was wiping down a table, I looked out the window and saw a family walk by, a mother, father, and 2 kids, laughing together. For a moment, I felt a pang of longing, a small, sharp ache in my chest. But then I looked at my own reflection in the window, and I smiled, because I realized that the family I had always wanted wasn't the one that had abandoned me. It was the one I was creating for myself. I was no longer the girl left behind. I was a woman who had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and nothing, no one, was going to hold me back anymore. The day I stopped answering their calls, the day I finally blocked them out of my life, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even realize had been there. For years, I had carried the burden of trying to make them proud, of trying to prove that I was worthy of their love and attention. But now I was free. Free from their expectations, free from their cruelty, free from the idea that my worth depended on their validation. One day, I sat in my tiny apartment, looking around at the life I had built. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I had survived on my own terms, and for the first time in my life, I felt peace, true peace. Jacob, they wanted to see if I could make it on my own. Well, I did, and I've never looked back. I realized, in that moment, that my family's betrayal had been the catalyst for something I hadn't understood at the time. It pushed me to become who I am today. It wasn't the love I had wanted from them that had fueled my journey. It was my own strength, my own will to survive. They had underestimated me. But in the end, that was their mistake, not mine. The Alberti wasn't just about surviving. It wasn't just about getting by. It was about thriving. It was about building a life I could be proud of on my own terms. And that was the real triumph. When I first got that job at Sunny's, I never imagined I'd end up where I am now. I thought I was just surviving, just trying to make it through the next day. But now, I had a steady job, a roof over my head, and the independence I had fought so hard for. I didn't just make a living. I built something that was mine. I wasn't working for anyone else's approval. I was working for myself. And that felt better than anything I could have imagined. Jacob, I didn't need to prove anything to them. I'd done more than survive. I'd thrived. I had my own apartment. I had a job that didn't just pay the bills, but gave me purpose. I had learned to trust myself, to take control of my own life. and I had no one to thank for that except me. As I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't that scared, uncertain girl anymore. I was Alina, a woman who had taken the pieces of a broken past and built a future from them. And no one, not even my family, could take that away from me. The real Alberty wasn't just in surviving the betrayal. It was in becoming someone who didn't need anyone's validation to feel whole. I had created a life that was mine, and nothing was going to take that away. They had wanted to break me, but instead, they had unknowingly pushed me toward my own strength, toward the life I never thought I could have. And now it was mine. The past was over. I had healed. I had built something better than I had ever expected. And I was just getting started. As I sit here now, looking back on everything, I can't help but reflect on the lessons I've learned. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was mine. I used to wish I could go back and change everything. I thought if I could just fix my family, maybe things would be different. But now, after everything I've been through, I know something deep inside me. The person I've become is worth more than any family I could have had. I've spent so many years trying to please them, trying to be someone I wasn't just to gain their love. But what I've learned is this: I am enough just as I am. The pain, the abandonment, it doesn't define me anymore. It's a part of my story, but it's not the end of it. The real story is about what I've done after. It's about how I picked myself up, rebuilt my life, and learned to trust myself. I've healed. I've grown. And I've become someone stronger than I ever imagined. And for that, I am proud. I don't look back at my family anymore. I used to wonder if there would be a day when they'd come crawling back, asking for forgiveness, trying to fix what they broke. But now, I don't need them. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I don't need their approval to keep moving forward. Jacob, my family's gone. But I'm okay. I'm more than okay. And that's all that matters. The chapter with them is closed. I'm free. Free to create my own future on my own terms. And maybe that's the best thing I could have ever hoped for. Jacob, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt abandoned or lost, just know you can rebuild. You can stand tall even if you have to do it on your own. You have the strength inside you, and no one can take that away. If you're out there, feeling like I once did, trapped in a situation you can't control, just remember, you are your own power, and that's more than enough. Stay strong. Stay true to yourself. And remember, it's never too late to change your life.